Greetings and salutations. I'd like to welcome everyone to another chapter of a Design for Living Big Book study. I am an alcoholic. My name is Bill. I am here with my co-host, co-partner in crime, Elizabeth. We're studying the book Alcoholics Anonymous. It is May the 5th of 2025. Happy Cinco de Mayo. We're in the doctor's opinion on Roman numeral XXBIII. That would be 28 if you are in Rome. It's 28 if you're here in the United States. It's just spelled differently. Before we begin, and we're in the first full paragraph at the top of the page, what we covered in the last couple weeks or so was the preface, the foreword to the first four editions of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It briefly described the growth of the fellowship, any changes in the book, and some foreshadowing of what might come in the future, which we have. Obviously, we're living here right on Zoom. We covered the first letter that the doctor gave Alcoholics Anonymous. And as I was reading it again today, he does not mention the allergy to alcohol in the first letter. What he does is he gives us a recommendation to anyone who may be suffering from this illness. And he talks about some type of moral psychology, and doctors have tried to do this, but they've made little impression as a whole. So he encourages this movement. It isn't until Bill writes the foreword to the second letter the doctor gave us, where he talks about, we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. Down at the bottom of page XXVI, and this is just a recap, the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us as laymen. That means people who have no medical expertise and are not alcoholics. Our opinion as to his soundness may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers or alcoholics who are in remission, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. And he's going to go into the depths of it and what the allergy looks like. It does not look like an allergy that you may have to peanuts, strawberries, or poison ivy. The allergy to alcohol is an abnormal response. It's the greater thirst that comes with each drink than the preceding drink, and it seems to be insatiable. When it's insatiable, we as good alcoholics try and satisfy it. What that does is leads us into a state of drunkenness, and then we do absurd, incredible, tragic things under the influence of alcohol, and over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. So that brings us up to this. Elizabeth, do you want to read, or would you like me to read a couple paragraphs?
I can read.
Come on.
Hi, Elizabeth Alcoholic. We believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Let me keep going. Keep going. All right. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. You talk first.
Just one, I'll go first and then it's real quick. Just one thing to note here. It says, in order to be an alcoholic, to have that diagnosis, to come in here and say, guess what, I have alcoholism, you must have at least one time in your life had this allergic reaction called the phenomenon of craving. Because the book says it never, ever occurs in the average temperate drinker. So if you've never had it, you might not be one of us. And if you've had it one time, no matter what you think, feel, or believe, by the physical or medical description, you are one of us, because it never happens in a non-alcoholic. There's a little bit of debate about using alcohol in any form. Some people say it comes in solid form, powder form, vegetable form. I believe what they're talking about is the liquid form that alcohol comes in, whether it's cough syrup, liqueur, wine, beer, Bix 44, near beer. If it's liquid alcohol, what it's saying is as soon as it enters my lips and goes down my throat, maybe it doesn't take that long, it sets in motion this allergic reaction. That's what they're alluding to. But because we are a compendium and say we are not affiliated, if you have the phenomenon of craving to any other substance that's destroying your life, the 12 steps will eliminate the obsession of the mind, but we will never, ever eradicate the allergy of the body, at least not today. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just wanted to point out too, though, some of us get here really early, and it'll talk about that a little later, but potential alcoholics that get here before this happens. So it's possible, but I appreciate what you said too, because alcohol, people don't know, oh, can I drink cough syrup? Well, no. Not if it has alcohol in it. It's worse than some of the stuff we can buy at the liquor store. God. But I love the last sentence of that paragraph too. Their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. And I know when I came in here, I had a world of problems that I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't really know what was wrong. I didn't know that it was alcohol was at the center of my life. And I did things when I drank that I didn't do when I was sober. So I didn't know. I remember asking a few times, over the course of years, what's wrong with me? Why, I knew I was making really bad decisions and I didn't know why. Because my life was a haze of drinking, partying, whatever. And I running away from reality as hard as I could. So that people usually don't come in here on a high note, right? They got a lot of problems when they get here. And I like the, frothy emotional appeal. What does that mean? Oh, can't you quit for your job? Can't you quit for your wife? Can't you, the message meaning depth and weight, it means I need to hear it. And we're going to talk about this soon. The depth and weight means you tell me your story and I hear something that I've never heard from anybody else in my life. I hear you talking about how I think, how I feel, how I drank. And when I hear that, that sparks like, oh, wait a minute, they know what they're talking about, right? Because I'm skeptical if I don't think I know what you're talking, you don't know what's going on with me. But, the experience I had when I got here was, I thought y'all were reading my mind. I literally thought, how do these people know what I think? And then they tell me, oh, and what's really saved me, I was talking to Sponti about this today, is I did get here early, but because I made that connection that what I went through, we have the same way of thinking about this stuff. Then some of the people who went through worse things than I did, I believe them. Thank God. So I didn't have to try that experiment again of trying to drink because I know what's out there for me. And I believe wholeheartedly that it's out there for me. I don't believe that I could go back and drink socially. I don't even know. I never did. I don't even know what that is. Like, what's the point of that? So, I really like what that means, depth and weight. We talk about our drinking to each other so we can get that identification and understand what we're here. And then it says we recreate our lives. We're making a new life. I don't just put potholes on the old life. I don't go hang out with the drinking buddies while they're getting wasted. I have a whole new world today. It's a whole new world. I run with different people than I used to. My life looks completely different. Alcoholism steered the course of my life like a one of those, vinyl album things. What do they call that thing where it goes scratches right across the, and I wasn't happy about it at the time. My whole life was supposed to be different than it was. And alcoholism brought me consequences that made that path impossible. But now I'm really grateful. I have a brand new life starting in my 20s, and I'm very grateful. I see what the life looked like that I was supposed to have, and I don't want it. I see people who followed that path, and it's definitely not the same. Do you want to read next? You want me to keep reading?
I can read.
Go ahead.
If any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us a while on the firing line, see the tragedies. the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become a part of their daily work and even of their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel after many years of experience that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them. So, from an outside point of view, when Bill Wilson described it in one of his books, he said that Dr. Silkworth, although he was not an alcoholic, almost gave the impression that he had stood inside the cave. And what Bill Wilson described is, like Elizabeth was talking about, brought the emotional appeal. People standing outside of the cave telling us we shouldn't do this. Can't we see what we're doing to ourselves? Look what we're doing to them. We're going to lose our job. We're on our way to prison. We just got out of bankruptcy. And it talks about them. Behind them is a world of ignorance. We're going to get into that later in the book because their reaction to alcohol is different than ours. But the 10-pin strike was when Dr. Silkworth came up with this opinion, this idea that we had an allergy. He didn't experience it, but he understood it. And when he came to Bill with that approach, Bill said for the first time he felt as though Silky had stood in the cave with him and wasn't talking to him from outside. And that's the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous, as we read in the foreword to the 3rd edition. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. Before we got into the theory, I wanted to stop there and say something about that, Elizabeth, if you have anything to say about that paragraph. If not, talk about why people drink.
Oh, well, we did forget one thing. It says in nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to I forgot about that part. I like to point out how many times it talks about the idea and action. It's not just the idea or just the action. So there again, they're saying it, ideals and recreate, idea and action. And they say this repeatedly throughout the book, that we have spiritual ideals that we're working towards, and then we have to put them into action. So I don't know how many times it says that, but it says it a lot. So we forgot that part. I just wanted to say that. But I love how he says there's been nothing that's contributed more. That they've tried and tried everything, and I think that's so important to remember, right? We have all these things available to us, and yet this thing works. That's it. Go ahead.
And this paragraph I've always found to be, it segues into something. I just want to pay attention to it, because initially he starts off saying men and women, doesn't say alcoholic men and women, but men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. I suspect they don't drink whiskey for the taste. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. What happens is we've gone from being men and women who drink because we like the effect to someone who the effect begins to elude us and we pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. This segues into alcoholic drinking. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience a sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. You're up.
Yeah, this paragraph, man, right? This is one of the biggest, I mean, this is the strongest paragraph, right? We drink for the effect. We're not the only ones, right? Why would people drink at all? Because, it's supposed to enhance a good time or help, somebody cope with a bad time. But they don't have the phenomenon of craving that then goes on and destroys their lives. You're like, oh, I'm feeling it. I think I'm going to quit now. But they want that. I love this because also, They cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. You know, my mind changes when I drink completely. When I'm in the disease, I can be in the disease sober. When I'm in the disease of my mind, I can justify anything to myself. If there's something I don't want to change, if there's something, you know, I went through sugar addiction and I'm gaining weight when I got older and I couldn't stay skinny anymore and I didn't like it. I can, in my head, I'm thinking, oh, well, I didn't eat dinner, so I can eat a box of cookies now. I'll justify anything, man. If I want to do it, I'm going to figure out how to make myself agree with it. And that, you know, so I can't differentiate the true from the false. Elizabeth, all you're eating is carbs, you're gaining weight. Like, where's the protein? Where's the greens, right? And in my head, I'm like, oh, but I didn't eat dinner, so I can get away with all this dessert, right? Like anything, I'll make it work in my head, and that's what it means. And when I take women through the book, especially if they've already gone through it on drinking, you know, they're not a newcomer anymore. I say, where are you now with that true from false? Are you seeing the truth? Like, are you checking it out? And the funny thing is, I can think something and I can actually just think about telling my sponsor something, right? I can think about saying the words out loud to her and then I get on that, something changes, right? I know because I can't lie to her. I've never lied to her that I can think of ever in my life. And there's something that happens. It's like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Or think about telling people at a meeting. That was the first thing that started to have me seeing this true from false stuff in my head. Am I comfortable about this enough to go to a whole AA meeting and tell everybody at the meeting what I'm doing, right? And that's where pride can kind of be a helpful thing at first, you know? And then their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. I didn't know. I didn't hang out with people that didn't have alcohol at the center of their life. So how would I know? Right? That we had the girl that brought the flask to the bar because the drinks weren't strong enough, right? That's the kind of people I surrounded myself with. Hey, can we get some? Where are we getting some today? What you know, I would drive to college, couldn't find a parking space. I'd go to this girl Patty's house. I'd say, let's go get some. She'd say, let's go get some. We'd go. And let me tell you what, oh boy. Um, and I remember when I first got sober, my dad was sober, and he said, Elizabeth, I love this. You can use this with newcomers that don't know their mind is different. He said, what if the doctor said, Elizabeth, stop eating broccoli? It's going to kill you. Well, if my mind thought, well, what if I only eat one piece of broccoli a day? Well, what if I only eat it on the weekends? Well, what am I going to do when my friends are eating broccoli? That sounds insane. That's how I thought about alcohol, and I didn't know that it was crazy. Alcohol was causing problems in my life. And even if somebody's not totally sure, if they're one of us, sometimes you can say, well, look what alcohol's doing in your life. You know, do you want that? And that's kind of like a good starting point for some people if they're just not sure, especially if they're having problems or they got here because, you know, they have to go to court, they got to get verification and stuff. And then I love that restless, irritable, and discontented, unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. You know, I've felt that way so often in my life, that just restless. And this is a place where my sponsor said it's important that we know what these words mean to us. It doesn't matter what they mean to you or to some AA historian or what you know, what does it mean to you? What does restlessness look like on Elizabeth? You know, what does it look like when I'm irritable? You can have my husband's in the room. He knows. He's like, she hadn't eaten yet. Let's get her some food. You know, what does it mean to be discontented? And it's discontented, by the way. I have a pet peeve when people say discontent. I'm like, oh, that's one of my little pet peeves. But it means that I'm walking around finding fault, like with people's grammar, for example, like I just said. I'm walking around all the time. I walk in the kitchen and I see the floor's dirty. I don't see that the dishes have all been put away. My brain thinks differently. This is why I need a program. Me just stopping drinking makes it worse because I'm still restless, irritable, and discontented, and I'm walking around in the world unhappy. If I don't change, if I, you know, it says we need this psychic change. What does that mean? It means my entire relationship with the world changes. You know, later in the book it says, are we not producers of confusion instead of harmony? My goal today is to produce harmony, to walk around in the world and be kind, to say, Chrissy, I see you. What's going on with you today? Tyler, how are you doing? Deirdre, you know, did you have fun last week on your trip? Like, to really be present in that moment and see the positives in life and to connect and like all the good stuff instead of walking around in my mind thinking, I don't like this. I have to go to a business meeting now tomorrow. Bill, I'm teasing you. And thinking about the negatives, but my brain naturally will go to negative because that's the state of my disease, right? And it took me a long time to understand this. Let me see. It's repeated over and over and over. Yep. And I don't notice when it says it's repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope. I don't see that it's repeated over and over because I have a different excuse and a different justification for how come it didn't work this time. I'm back in that delusion of don't know true from false. I'm back in that falsehood. Back in the disease. My sponsor once told me, I was dealing with another drinking alcoholic in my life. She said, you can't reason with them. They're not in reality. They can't see it. And we all know if we've worked with new people, we see the difference between somebody who's fighting to admit that they're one of us versus the people that are ready for help, right? They'll wear you out if they're not ready. That's why we wait till they're ready. We see if they're ready. Say, go drink some more if you're not convinced. I'm not here to convince you. That's not my job, you know? But I'll tell you what happened for me. And if you think that you have something like I do, then we got a solution. If not, go do your thing. Have at it. Yeah, I don't work with people who don't do the deal. If they want to go do it their way, go for it. Let me know if you need me. I'm here. That's it. Go ahead, Bill. We can
Just
talk
one
about this
thing.
paragraph for days. I love it. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one thing about the restless, irritable, and discontented. I believe there's two manifestations of that. One is when the beast is demanding to be fed and it's closing time and I can't get any more to put inside of me. That's the immediate withdrawal from not feeding the craving. I believe that the restless, irritable, and discontentedness, where I'm seeing other people take the first drinking with impunity, is from a position of what we call untreated alcoholism from a sober standpoint, or dry drunk syndrome, because I become up, everything seems to bother me, and I don't know what the problem is until I get into the steps. I believe those are two different restlessness, and sometimes we talk about them as if we're not acknowledging the one, because I'll tell you what, if I ever got arrested and I wasn't done putting one in me, I was very disturbed. I didn't like going to jail, but worse than that, I could no longer feed that craving that was beyond my control. The other restlessness took place after some days abstinent when all of a sudden, as Clancy says, the screw in my gut started tightening and you became very offensive to me and all the idiots came out to play. That type of restless, irritable, and discontented nature would always lead me back to the first drink. And that's the nature of this illness, whether I believe it or not. I'm not drinking because I want to drink more than I want to stay sober. I'm drinking because I can't not drink. I'm blocked from the only thing that can stop me from putting the first one in. That's why he says, unless an entire psychic change, a change in the thinking, a change in the whole persona, I guess, is experienced, there's very little hope for our recovery. The good news is, on the other hand, and
Wait a minute.
strange
Wait.
as
One more thing about the psychic change. When you're 5 years sober and your boss is driving you crazy, and she's really doing some things that are bothering you, right? I always remind people about step one. I'm the one with the disease. I'm the one that has to change my attitude. She may or may not change. There's going to be people like that in our lives, you know? But it's that to go back, always remember that step one is so important because I think that, there's just paths back to relapse, right? And if I'm living in the second half of step one, which is that I'm trying to manage everything myself, my reactions, right? Do I try to force myself to accept this person? And no, I turn to God and say, God, what would you have me do? Constantly, over and over, repeated practice of turning to my higher power and saying, what would you like me to do here? Why do I have to keep doing that? Why do I have to keep on being humble when the world around me is full of assholes sometimes, Because I'm the one with the disease. I'm the one that has to change. They may or may not, you know? And I just like to point that out, it's an entire psychic change. And I have to keep that step one fresh and know. And that's why we do work with others, right? I mean, it's my participation with newcomers. I keep getting reminded what's out there. And it's a whole cycle, right? And it helps remind us. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
it's a $1 million hit, even at 5 years sober. Sometimes what my boss is doing does not provoke annoyance unless I'm full of self, fancied or real. Sometimes the worst things that ever happened to me never took place. But it's an indication, as you said, it's an indication. And guess what? I might be getting sick again and not know it. It looks like them, but it's always me because I can't, the world and its people dominate us. So this is tremendous when we learn this. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change, which is defined in the spiritual awakening, the appendix, a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery, has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. Maybe the steps, they may be suggestions from a sponsor, but there's a few simple rules if you want to produce a psychic change. I'll read a couple more paragraphs. Men have
Well, just
cried out.
notice the word necessary. So
Pardon?
in there, when they say the word suggestion later on, you got those people that say, we don't have to do the steps, they're just suggested. Well, back in 1939, the word suggestion meant subtle command. But notice elsewhere, right? The only effort necessary, right? I don't want to have to walk through the world, white knuckling it whenever alcohol's around, right? I want to have the psychic change so I can be happy and useful in my life. Yeah, man. Go ahead, Bill.
Have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. Should read one more, right?
Yeah, go for it.
I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interest, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. The best way I can say that, I'll sum it up in one sentence. I cannot stop with my mind what I start with my body. Go ahead.
Nice. No, why don't you say some more on that, and then I'll have just a couple short comments.
I said, I thought I said it almost fast. What happens is because of the inability to connect the dots, that the first drink is going to lead into a spree beyond my mental control, that I'm not going to be able to stop when it's appropriate, when it's in my best interest, when it's necessary. I put the first drink in me, setting the cycle in motion. And interestingly enough, the doctor's going to tell us, if he hasn't already, that their suggestion is entire abstinence, which guess what that means? Don't drink. If our only problem was the allergy, the great thirst that comes at once by taking a drink or even more drinks, our solution would be to not put the first drink inside of us, setting the cycle in motion. But as it's going to tell us later on in chapter 2, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. I have something inside me that compels me to take the first drink, and then the inability with the same mind that compels me to uncompel me to stop drinking when it's beyond. Well, you guys know, I already gave you the examples. When it's necessary, in my best interest, appropriate, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and they're talking again about, look at the drastic change that occurs when I'm in the disease. You know, I'm not in recovery anymore. It's like, boom, something switches and now this is the most important thing. That's it. Right? And I like how he says they do not, many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. And I'm going to share in the chat. Dr. Harry Tebow writes about this. He has a therapy about why therapy is not enough for alcoholics. Because therapy, we're talking about ourselves. We're in self. We don't go out. We're, you know, if therapist said, all right, now take what you learned and go help others with it. Maybe it'd be enough, right? Because that's what AA does. It tells us we got to go help others and carry this message and take other people through this work. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Do you want me to read some?
Go ahead, please do.
Okay. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We are all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. You want to speak on that one real quick? Difference between a resolution and a decision. I was taught that a decision has a plan of action behind it. You agree with that, Bill? Yeah. There is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There is the manic depressive type who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Then there are types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, and friendly people. And just a quick word on that. I have a sponsee like this. She gets along with her husband. She's doing great at work. I mean, she's so functional. and I thought for a while that she wasn't even an alcoholic. I'm like, how's this woman not got all the isms that I got, you know? And then I remembered this paragraph. So it's important to know, you know, we got different types out there. All these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. And I really love this because, you know, and I know some people go to a lot of those all 12-step recovery, all addictions and all that stuff. But you know, the thing that compels an alcoholic to drink, and then not be able to stop. Like I think it's important that singleness of purpose that AA has to talk to that. I don't know what it's like. I have not had that problem with other substances myself, but I just like, you know, that I know I'm an alcoholic. I may have things in common with other addicts and other people with other mental health issues. I have a few myself that I deal with, but that one singleness of purpose that AA has, you know, and I'm just speaking to the alcoholics in the room. Like I know that I'm an alcoholic because of what happens when I drink alcohol. That it's over. You know, if I get alcohol into my system, it's over. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows if I'll live, if I'll make it back, you know? I don't know if it's like that for other substances just because I don't have that experience. You know, I didn't really care about cocaine. I didn't get the big deal. It was like lobster, it tastes like butter. You know, like what's the deal? I had more fun chopping it up than I did doing it. I was like, why is this a big? But see, to a cocaine addict, you know, and I tell people the first step, you need to have that identification with other people, you know, or even with alcohol. Like, do you need to work the steps or just go to meetings? Know what you need. Where are you classified here? How much of this stuff do you need? You know, I was a meeting maker for a long time. I made it. And then I had to get into the steps. Then it wasn't enough, you know. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
Just it just tells us. So the one thing we all have in common, it doesn't matter what else we come in here with. We have the allergy to alcohol, the phenomenon of craving. But the first paragraph you read, And I always used to think that meant that they gave up when it says the supreme sacrifice. I always thought that meant that they picked up the first drink again, sacrificing their sobriety. But I believe what they're talking about is the supreme sacrifice is I stick a gun in my mouth and blow my brains out. That's the supreme sacrifice because I just can't fight no more. There's no solution. Boom, this keeps happening over and over and over again. And many of us make the supreme sacrifice rather than fight again. That's it.
This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. I think that's really important to point out to people too. You know, there are so many people out there that think they say, "Oh, I tried AA and it didn't work for me." Oh, really? Did you try all 12 steps? Because it's a 12-step program. It's not an 11-step program. It's not a 4-step program. You know, what were you doing the day that you drank again? Were you helping anybody? You know, there's like so many things to that. It's like you understand that this you want if you have your version and it works, okay, great. But if it doesn't, that's because of, you know, this, right? It's a drastic. It talks about that. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About 1 year prior to this experience was a man brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life and was living, one might say, to drink, and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time had passed with no return to alcohol. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party and, in desperate condition, brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he might have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology, and we doubted if even that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. William D. Silkworth, MD. Go ahead, Bill.
And next to the first paragraph you read, and this was written, he gave him this letter in 1939, maybe this one in 1941, I don't recall exactly, but it was early on. The opinion of most doctors with the most chronic alcoholics were doomed. What Elizabeth is talking about now, Alcoholics Anonymous is a household name. It's on every corner, in every church, on every TV show. Everyone knows about Alcoholics Anonymous. So what's happening now is people are getting here who only, like the book says, felt the first nip of the ringer. If there's no desperation, like she said, why would you take the 12 steps if you got your first DUI, the judge tells you to come to AA and you find it easily able to control your desire for the first drink? That's not who he's referring to. If you remember, it says doctors are rightly loath to tell an alcoholic. Reluctant, number one, it means a twofold word. Loathe means reluctant, and they're hated when they do because it was a death sentence back then. A lot has changed since this book came out 86 years ago in the Fellowship of AA. has been in place for 90 years. I want to say that the first guy that he's talking about was Hank Parkhurst or Jimmy Burwell. I don't recall. I know the second one was Fitzmayo, and he's alluded to in this book 2 times. And then he has a story in the back of the book called Our Southern Friend. And it's real interesting. It's in every edition because it's referred to in this book. It says later on, you'll read the experience in chapter 4 of a man who thought he was an atheist, and that was him again. But I don't want to get into the history of it. I'm not the other crew. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it's just pointing out again that these people had tried everything else and it didn't work. So he's just encouraging this doctor with all this experience is telling people like try this, because what we're about to hear is just definitely not what they were doing, right? I mean, they think they need to go to the hospital or to another doctor. So they're just trying to give it, credentials here and say, here are the examples, and I can imagine, I mean, it was the first time people saw really hope on this, on what to do about this disease, because they had been trying everything else. And I always heard this book was written for the low bottom drunk, because they had tried everything. That's all I got. Do we want to open it up for sharing then?
We're going to stop the recording now for those who are listening. We've concluded with the doctor's opinion. Again, it's May 5th. On May 12th, we will pick up with Bill's story, which is the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. No one can prove he's in AA because I've never seen him at a meeting, but I got to take their word for it.